Hey everyone, super excited about this one. My guest today is, I guess, the definition of an entrepreneur. He's a lawyer, but you probably know him as the COO, the Chief Operating Officer of Shopify. He recently received the Canadian Angel Investor of the Year Award, Canada's Top 40 Under 40 Award. He was inducted to the Order of Ottawa. From 2014 to 2017, he was on the board of the C100. And in December 2017, he was appointed to a 5-year term to the board of directors of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the CBC. It's an absolute pleasure to have my man, Harley Finkelstein, come chat with me. Harley, welcome.
Jason, thanks for having me. It's a great honor to be on your show, and congrats on turning this, this podcast, this interview series into something really meaningful for a lot of people.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Look, I wore the black tee in solidarity.
I appreciate that. Awesome. Thank you. Do you wear a black t-shirt? Is this?
No, this is just for you. I was hoping you'd come out in the black tee if you were wearing something different.
I wear a black t-shirt every day, but I saw you had my friend Damon John on I think last week or week before, and Damon loves to get dressed up, and so I was wondering if you got dressed up for Damon, and then you wore a black t-shirt for me. But
I look at what the guests like to wear, and I want them to feel comfortable.
That's cool. That's called empathy. That's wonderful.
I was looking actually before the show started. I had a clothing brand before I started the agency, and I was trying to look back when I launched my Shopify store, and it was August 2011. So wow, how close am I to old school, like OG status on Shopify?
I think you're OG status. I think anyone basically between 2011, we'd just taken our Series A round at that point, probably pre-Series B. So you were pretty early on. And actually, a little bit of sort of Harley and Jason trivia. I actually know the clothing brand. You made those beautiful. It was sports apparel or sports inspired apparel, but you did it in a way that felt very vintagey, and you kind of married, sports apparel with fashion. And one of my mentors is a man named Michael Ellison, who I think you may know. Yeah. Michael's been a mentor of mine since.
He turned me on to Shopify, by the way. He's the one that told me to reach out and look at it.
Michael was the one that introduced your brand to me way back when. And Michael is an incredible entrepreneur as well, but also has been a huge influence on my life. And he's a great dude.
Awesome. Let's back up for a second. Before Shopify was, the second largest retailer in the USA right now, behind another company that we don't have to talk about or mention. Take me back for the entrepreneurs who are just getting started, or for the ones on the journey. Paint them the story of how this started for you.
Yeah. I was born in Montreal, lived in Dollar-des-Ormeaux in the West Island, which is a suburb, for those of you that don't know Montreal, of the city. When I was about 13 years old, my family picked up and moved to South Florida. So I went to high school in South Florida. 2001, 17 years old, decided to go to McGill University, which if you're a 17-year-old and you don't live in Montreal, to go back to Montreal is like the greatest thing in the world. But that was a heavy year for a bunch of reasons. One, it was September 11th happened, so the economy was struggling. Second was the markets completely fell apart. And third, my parents went through the most devastating thing that anyone can go through. My parents lost everything, and we lost our house, we lost our money, we had nothing. And I was sort of given this choice at that point to either stay in Montreal and fend for myself, or alternatively move back down to South Florida and live with my family. And I just felt like it was the right thing for me to do, was to stay, but concurrently figure out a way to support myself, support my mom and two much younger sisters, and just kind of make it work. And at 17 years old, you don't really know what the hell you're doing, but I felt it was the right thing to do. I knew that I couldn't work a part-time job, a traditional job, because I wanted to finish undergrad. I wanted to finish my courses, and I didn't want to delay that. So I only had one choice, which was to start a business, because what else runs concurrently with going to class? And I ended up starting a little t-shirt business while I was a student at McGill, making t-shirts for universities. And it was a great business because it was a low barrier to entry, meaning I didn't have any money, so it was easier for me to start. But it was a good business model because I sold mostly to student councils, universities across Canada. So the person that was writing the check to pay for the t-shirts wasn't actually the person paying the money. The university was. They were almost they were responsible, or they were responsible for buying the t-shirts and the procurement side of it, but it felt like a good business model. And I figured out what I had that American Apparel or Russell Athletics or any of the other big promotional product companies and t-shirt companies didn't have. I didn't have a brand. I didn't have infrastructure, but what I did have was it was owner operated. So I would make the experience of any university buying t-shirts from me so much better than anybody else. We would do these mini fashion shows in the student council offices. I was a student there, so I knew what students wanted. I knew they didn't want crappy oversized t-shirts. They wanted great t-shirts with the right GSM count, the right ribbing, the right collars, things that fit well. I gave student council representatives my phone number. If they had any problems, they can call me at any hour of the day. So I doubled down on the things that I had that American Apparel didn't have. And by the time I finished undergrad, we were making t-shirts and promotional products for, I don't know, dozens of universities across Canada. A mentor of mine named Philip Reimer, who some people may know who are watching, who's a lawyer in Ottawa, had convinced me to consider going to law school after undergrad, not to become a lawyer per se, but really because he had felt that law school would be almost like finishing school for me and would help me become a better entrepreneur. And Phil happened to be teaching law at the University of Ottawa. So I applied to one school for law school. I applied to the University of Ottawa and I got in, and I moved to Ottawa in 2005. Moved to Ottawa, start law school, realized that the business that I had in undergrad was not going to scale in law school, because in undergrad, you don't have to show up for class. It's actually a brilliant model in that you show up for the exams, you do well, you pass. Law school,
or become friends with the TA and
yeah, maybe that's more your hustle. I wasn't as charismatic and charming as you were, but what I realized in law school was they used something called the Socratic method. And the Socratic method, which is still used today in law schools all over the world, is they call it your name, and if you don't have the answer to the question, you may fail the class. Participation matters. So I needed a business that was different than my sort of B2B wholesale t-shirt promotional product business. I needed something that was more virtual. When I got to Ottawa, not having any friends or family there, I asked around, hey, where are the entrepreneurs hanging out? Because that had become my tribe in South Florida. It became my tribe when I was at McGill. And it turned out that a few entrepreneurs were hanging out at a coffee shop in Ottawa, in the Glebe, at a Bridgehead coffee shop. And so I just started showing up at the coffee shop every Friday night, and I became friends with this group of 5 or 6 entrepreneurs. And one of those entrepreneurs was Toby, who's the founder of Shopify. And Toby was just transitioning from selling snowboards online to selling the software that he had written to sell those snowboards. And I told him that I was thinking of starting an online business, an online store. This is like 2005, 2006. And I ended up becoming one of Shopify's first merchants. I built a online t-shirt store called Smoofer. And I spent the rest of my law school and I went to business school after that, basically building this really cool online t-shirt business. 2008, moved to Toronto. I practiced law for all of 10 months. I was the world's worst lawyer, still am. But I hated law. It was just not something I wanted to do. And so in 2009, I called Toby back and said, I'm going to move from Toronto back to Ottawa, and I want to help you. And at the time, there were 2 others, Daniel and Cody. So really 3 very, very smart, cerebral, brilliant engineers. And I want to be sort of the 4th musketeer and the person that really thought about the business side and the commercialization side of Shopify. And that was about 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago. And it's been the ride of my life. And I'm most certainly doing my life's work there. So that's great. So you actually did the reverse. I got into law school, declined, and then started a t-shirt company. Maybe you were smarter than I was.
You actually did the t-shirt and then went to law school. So no, still not if my mom's listening, I still apologize for not going to law school. I'm not living that one down.
It's funny because I think up until our IPO, which happened 5 years ago, almost to the day, my mom and dad, I think, were still disappointed that I wasn't practicing law. And it was only when we took Shopify public, and obviously,
like, all right, maybe he knows what he's talking about.
At that point, my mom and dad and my Bubby and Zadie, my grandparents, were like, okay, well, maybe this was the right thing. But it took them, I think, a while to recognize what the heck I was doing.
So, I mean, amazing story, because if you didn't go to the coffee shop, we may not be sitting here today, right?
We may not, or we'd be talking about the schmutza business, the clothing, the apparel.
Exactly.
Right? Not talking about what is now one of the largest companies on the planet.
So how important is luck when it comes to business?
Incredibly. And it's something that people don't like to talk about because it's very difficult to replicate luck. It's very difficult to strategize luck. But it plays a huge role. I mean, look, forget Harley for a second, just talk about Shopify. When Toby wrote those first lines of code for Snow Devil, one, he wrote the code in a software language called Ruby on Rails, which was just up and coming. It was Shopify, 37 Signals, and Twitter that were the first companies that were really built on this new, very modern coding language called Ruby on Rails. Second of all, e-commerce was just emerging. You really had a bunch of different marketplaces, but in order for you to build your own online store, it was very, very expensive, like 7 figures. Otherwise, you had no other options. And so luck and timing certainly play a role, but so does putting yourself in a position where you can execute on that good fortune and you can execute on that serendipity. It's funny, I talk about the t-shirt business. Sometimes I talk about my little DJ business that I had. I don't talk about the slipper company. I don't talk about the watchwinder company. I don't talk about the nurse uniform company. My past is littered with a ton of failures. Luckily for me, the things that succeeded, offset the stuff that didn't. But the one thing that I still have in my DNA today, and I credit my grandparents for this, who are Hungarian immigrants, is that I've always felt like a survivor. I don't mean a Holocaust survivor. I didn't go through anything like that, but I mean I've always felt like a survivor in terms of give me, I can take a lot, and my ability to have an equal amount of energy on the next go around is consistent. And I think that's been my power, my superpower since I was a kid.
It also seems like something you and I both have in common is we're both tenacious in a sense that we're not afraid to ask. And I think, I was on a podcast recently where someone asked me what's the best advice I ever got, and it's just ask. So luck put you in that coffee shop, but you still went on a different way, right? You and Toby weren't partners after the coffee shop. You still had to go back and ask to be part of it. So luck put you in a situation to meet Toby, but it didn't get you what you wanted, which was a partnership with him, right? You had to then go back and ask and figure out that's what you wanted to do. So you actually took control.
Yeah, I think part of, I think no matter where you're at, if you're an entrepreneur or you work at a company or you work in, the public sector or you're anything, there is this human nature to want to find comfort all the time. We always want to find more comfort. And we are raised to seek comfort and seek certainty as much as possible. And I had to recalibrate my mind, my brain, my understanding of the world to actually get really, really comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I did that through coaching. I did that through mentorship, advisors, reading lots, meditation. But I knew that if I not only want to join Shopify, but eventually help to lead Shopify, I would not only have to qualify to get in the door, but I would consistently have to requalify every single week, every single month. And even now, I have to requalify to be the chief operating officer of Shopify every single week. Because if I don't requalify and there's someone else who would make a better COO of Shopify, that person should get the role. So by having this philosophy of getting really comfortable, being uncomfortable, and then feeling like you're never done, you're always trying to learn more. Carol Dweck has this great book called Mindset. I'm not sure if you read it, but it's almost required reading for everyone that I work with at Shopify. It talks about this idea of a growth mindset. That is the most important thing, I think, for an entrepreneur to have, or frankly, anyone at Shopify to have. And most folks have a fixed mindset where they feel like they know what they know and that's it. And they may tweak it and they may try to sharpen it, but there's a limited set of understanding and knowledge. And I don't believe that. I think that we all of us need to requalify for whatever we're doing every single week. But it also makes things a lot more fun that way and more interesting.
You talk about arming the rebels, right? That's something that you've been vocal on. When I first started the clothing brand, I was at the mercy of retailers. If They wanted a lower
the buyer
price.
was having a good day. The buyer put you on the shelves.
Yeah, if the buyer, for any reason, you're at their mercy, and you kind of brought power back to the people. Why is it so important for you?
Well, I think that, first of all, this idea of a level playing field is really, really important to me. When I built Smoofer, which is that online store on Shopify, I was competing with Walmart. I was competing with Sears. I was competing with Hot Topic. I was competing with a whole bunch of stores that were also selling licensed apparel. And I knew that I didn't have the economy of scale that they did. And so I would have to find new ways to compete. But what was very apparent to me in 2006 or 2007, as we were getting ramped up, was that most technology, most infrastructure that companies need were built for very, very large companies, that no one had really built enterprise grade software, highly scalable software for entrepreneurs and small businesses. And the reason is, for the most part, small businesses has not been an area that a lot of companies wanted to build for. Small business survival rates are lower than big companies. Small businesses tend to have limited budgets. Small businesses tend not to have a lot of employees. And so it's just historically had not been a great market. So what has tended to happen, at least in retail, is that a lot of it has shifted to a couple hegemonic retailers, whether it's the Amazons or the Walmarts of the world. And if someone who is building a great apparel company like you did with your apparel company, or like I had, wanted to sell to a global audience at scale and have an incredible consumer experience, I either needed to raise $1 million or I had to sell through a marketplace, which didn't allow me to own my own brand. It effectively made me rent customers from that marketplace. So a much better way to do it, a much better world, I think, a much better set of circumstances, is that what if we actually gave small business entrepreneurs the same tools that traditionally only the biggest companies were able to afford? Could we level the playing field? And we started doing that with e-commerce software to say, for $29, you can build a beautiful online store that is customized to your brand, that functions really well, that is highly scalable. And if you grow to be the next $50, $100 billion a year e-commerce retailer, you never have to leave the platform. So easy to start, but also easy to scale. And then what if we added the ability to sell offline with point of sale? And what if we added the ability to sell on Instagram and Facebook and cross-sell in marketplaces? And then what if we decided that each one of these merchants on Shopify, they themselves can't get capital easily, but what if we negotiated capital on their behalf? What if we negotiated shipping costs on their behalf? What if we negotiated credit card processing on their behalf? What if we negotiated fulfillment costs on their behalf? What if we help them build give them a bank account? What would happen? And the net result of it is that we've began to sort of level the playing field so that more of these small businesses, more of these entrepreneurs can compete with the biggest companies. And in many cases, they're winning. So back to the Rebels comment. There are some big companies out there, these hegemonic, large-scale retailers, marketplaces, that are trying to build an empire. We view our position, our objective in the world as, let's arm the rebels so that the rebels can fight for more rebels. And that for the future of retail and commerce to not only, to not only survive, but actually to thrive, it needs to be in the hands of the many, not in a couple big companies' hands. And the cool part is consumers have began to really vote with their wallets to support independent retailers, to support small businesses. And that's never been more apparent than right now during COVID.
But is it wrong to want to build an empire? I mean, when everyone's starting their e-com store and they're all stay small and they talk small, but I think, they have an end result in their mind of what they want. They want to be big. Everyone wants to build an empire. That's what we're taught as business. So is there anything wrong with wanting to have an empire?
No, there's nothing wrong. I mean, just before this, I was on a call with a friend, Ben Francis, who started his mom's kitchen table company called Gymshark. Gymshark is now one of the largest, most successful apparel brands on the planet. I don't know this for a fact, but I bet you at some board meeting inside of Nike, someone is bringing up, hey, what about Gymshark? They seem to be, coming a little bit close to us right now. Should be worried about. It is great to have big ambitions. We certainly do at Shopify. I certainly do in my own life. But I want to do it in a way where everyone's got a chance, where it's not just the person who has the most amount of money, the person with the most amount of capital who wins, but rather the person who has the most creativity, the most perseverance. I think entrepreneurship is this incredible way for human beings to build something meaningful, for human beings to be creative, for them to be to put something out there that is of value to others. Entrepreneurship is such a great way to solve problems, whether that's because you have to support yourself in undergrad or because you just are inspired and you're creative and you want to build this really cool t-shirt business. Entrepreneurship, I think, is super, super important. I think the more entrepreneurs we have in the world, the better the world is. But for so damn long, entrepreneurs did not have the opportunity to do so because the tools, the resources, the software was simply, the capital was limited to the biggest companies. And I think with Shopify, in 100 years from now, when people look back on the Shopify story, what I want people to think about is that we fundamentally level the playing field in a way that made everyone on the same, allowed everyone the same opportunity. And some of those small businesses will become empires one day, but they will remember, and certainly this is the case for Ben or the folks at Allbirds or Bombas or the folks at Fashion Nova or Kylie Cosmetics or any of the some of my favorite stores on Shopify. They know that they started at their mom's kitchen table, and therefore there's a sort of pay it forward approach where they want to create more entrepreneurs, where they don't want it to rest in the hands of just a few people, but rather distributed commerce, distributed business.
And you talk about leveling the playing field. One thing you're also doing is eliminating people's excuses, right? So the excuse used to be, I can't do this because I don't have capital, or I'm not starting my dream because I don't have this, this, and this. You kind of take away any excuses they told themselves and now made it super easy for them to go out and do. But when you talk about leveling the playing field, I'm assuming you're talking about the Shopify fulfillment network, right? So can you talk a little bit about that and what that is exactly?
So you mentioned this earlier, but this is an important point. So Shopify is not a retailer. We're not a marketplace. We are not a single brand. We are a platform. We have over 1 million stores on our platform that sell, that sold over $150 billion in aggregate. But if you were to pretend for a second that Shopify was a single retailer in the US, so what you would do is you would pretend for a moment that every one of our retailers in America, just use that country, was one retailer, and you combine them, what you would see is that we would be the second largest online retailer in the United States. Walmart be first, then Shopify as an aggregate. And then after that, you'd see everybody else. You'd see Walmart.com, you'd see Apple, you'd see Best Buy, you'd see eBay, you'd see all the others after that. Okay, why is that important? Well, it's important because we are in aggregate so large as a sort of pretend retailer for a moment, it means that we can go and negotiate on behalf of all those small businesses. And instead of keeping the economies of scale for ourselves, keeping the leverage of our size for ourselves, we can distribute it to to every one of those small businesses. So therefore, if a small business wants to do 2-day inexpensive or affordable shipping the way that Walmart does, on their own, there's no way to do that. But we can help facilitate it because of our aggregated leverage or aggregated economies of scale. So as I mentioned, we did e-commerce, we did point of sale for physical commerce. We've done solutions like payments and capital and fraud protection. And we've done shipping labels for a while, but it felt like one other area of commerce and retail was fulfillment. Very, very challenging. And again, unless you have massive size, you can't really take advantage of the incredible innovation that's happening around the world. We realized there was a bunch of these standalone, independent fulfillment centers all over the United States. Think about the fulfillment centers, for example, that were doing all the fulfillment for Forever 21 or for Neiman Marcus or for Barney's. Those companies don't exist anymore, or they're about to not exist. So they're sitting there empty. We don't actually want to buy those warehouses, but what if we simply built really sophisticated warehouse management software, WMS stuff, and we connected all these warehouses in a network called the Shop Fulfillment Network. And so Jason decides to start a brand new, incredible clothing company. And after 2 or 3 weeks of sales, we at Shopify can send you a note and say, we have a really good understanding of where your products are selling and where they're being delivered to and what SKUs need to be closest to which geographies. you should send these SKUs to a warehouse in Reno, Nevada. You should send these SKUs to a warehouse in Atlanta, these SKUs to a warehouse in New Jersey. And by virtue of that, you as the entrepreneur, you as the merchant, you don't have to worry about fulfillment anymore, because we are effectively connecting you, the demand side with the supply side of fulfillment. And now every time an order is made on your hypothetical online store, it simply triggers a very simple API call to the warehouse, the fulfillment center, and they ship it on your behalf. And they ship it out in a box that says Jason Clothing Co., not Amazon. And so it's another way that we continue to democratize entrepreneurship, and fulfillment's a really important one.
I love the last example with the box, because I work with a lot of e-com clients, for example, and I always preach own your brand, right? Because otherwise, if you're on other platforms like the one you just named, Amazon, you're kind of renting your client. Let's be honest. You don't own the customer, you're renting them.
Yep.
And most times, if you look at Amazon's fees, you're paying pretty high for that rent.
Yeah, I mean, some of these marketplaces, the listing fee and the transaction fee gets very, very close to your profit margin. I mean, they're able to see that. And so that's right. I mean, you're renting customers from them. Absolutely.
So with the democratization of distribution, which you're doing right now with fulfillment, I guess, in essence, which is why I love your platform, how important is it for customers to understand they need to own their brand?
If you go to Amazon right now and you type in Allbirds, you will see a bunch of fake Allbirds. The reason is the guys from Allbirds, who are incredible entrepreneurs and built their whole business on Shopify, we play very little small role in their success, but we've watched them grow into what I think is one of the greatest footwear brands on the planet. They don't want to sell on Amazon, fundamentally because they want to have a direct relationship with their end consumer. They want to own the profit margin. They believe they can sell their products better than any third party could. And they want to be vertically integrated. They want to design the shoes, manufacture the shoes, sell the shoes, and then do post-sale customer service. That is trickier to get, because that means that they have to acquire customers. They have to figure out the traffic. I know you talked a lot about funnels. They have to figure out their entire funnel to get people to come to their online store, and then for those browsers to become shoppers, and then hopefully return shoppers again, where they could list their products directly on Amazon and within 24 hours get sales. But that doesn't allow them to actually build one of the greatest footwear brands on the planet. So I think more and more what is happening is that the brands that we work with, whether it's Rebecca Minkoff or it's Steve Madden or it's Nicole Miller or it's I just posted Snickers on Twitter like this morning, I think this morning. Snickers now has a Shopify store because they're doing this amazing program where anyone can buy Snickers for frontline workers who are dealing with COVID in the hospitals. Wow. Incredible. So there is this trend now that brands want to have the direct connection with their end consumer, and that's what direct to consumer is all about. Now, I think some people assume direct to consumer or DTC is a bit of a fad. I don't believe that. I believe the direct to consumer is the way that retail should have always been. The problem was it wasn't accessible, but now it is. So now you can build a brand and have a direct relation with your consumer, and you can acquire customers yourself, either with paid ads and performance marketing, or with things like content marketing or social media marketing. I think it's really, really important, if you want to build a long-term, highly successful brand, for you to own the relationship with your end consumer. And if you don't, you are always going to be at risk of that intermediary deciding whether or not he or she wants you to continue operating anymore. And specifically with some of the big marketplaces, there is a chance that they decide, we're going to do a white label version of your product, and we're just not going to, we're going to take your business away from you. So I'm a big believer in sort of independent businesses, and I'm also a big believer in those independent businesses having a direct relationship with the people buying those products.
I love it, and I totally agree. So I'm happy you actually said that. With what's going on right now, with people at home, stuck, trying to figure out how to pivot, or adapt, keeping in line with what we're talking about right now. How important is becoming multi-channel? If not, like now, probably more than ever, and not just some strategy that people talk about in a boardroom of how, hey, let's be multi-channel, right? So how important is it to actually put into play right now?
I love that you said that, because I think you hit the nail on the head. Right now, there's board meetings happening all over the world where some big retailer, some big brand is talking about our strategy for 2020 is multi-channel. No, it's not. It's not a strategy. Multi-channel is a tactic. Your strategy should be, let's sell wherever our consumers are hanging out. That's the strategy. And so the fact that we're even talking about multi-channel in 2020 shows you that we're talking about that there's a tale of two retail worlds. You have the retail world that is being resilient, and those are the restaurants that are turning into wine shops, and those are the physical retailers that are doing curbside pickup, and those are the grocery stores that are moving online very quickly to sell meal kits. And then you have the other side of it, which is these resistant retailers that are resisting this tidal wave of change that is happening right now. And those are the ones that are going out of business, which is why we're seeing iconic retailers, iconic department stores going out of business. Some that have been around for 100 years. Because
they're also thinking that things will eventually go back to normal.
Exactly.
And they're not. Pause for a little bit and go back to normal and resume from there.
Yeah, because that would be great for them. Because they're optimizing for status quo returning. It's not. We're in a different world now. Think about this. E-commerce as a percentage of total retail went from 5% to 15% in the last 8 years, and went from 15% to 25% in the last 10 weeks. So that growth rate it's not going to continue to grow at that rate. That is an incredible growth rate. And that's sort of when I talk about the catalyzing of retail because of COVID, that's what happened. But we are never going back to the way it was. And any retailer that was sitting on the fence around e-commerce or around selling on Instagram or Facebook or being multi-channel, that debate is over now. If they haven't done it yet, they're doing it right now because they're being forced to. But I think the future of retail is not Instagram, it's not Facebook, it's not even the online store or the offline store. The future of retail and the future of commerce is consumer choice. And you as a brand and you as a retailer and you as a business need to figure out, how does your particular demographic want to purchase? And I got to tell you, if you are me, it better be an amazing online store, and you better have Shop Pay or Apple Pay or some sort of accelerated checkout, because I'm not typing in my address. If you want to sell to my wife, who's somewhere over there, she's going to want to have a mix of online and offline. She may want to buy online, pick up in store. She may want to buy in store, have the product shipped to her. But if you want to sell to Damon, for example, Damon John, you better have an amazing in-store experience, because Damon still values walking in and getting an education about the tie and the sport jacket. And so that's where the future is going. It's all about it's all about consumer choice, and you have to sell wherever your customer is. And the best channel for your particular business may be augmented reality. There's a store called Brad Sachs, who I think maybe watching, sent me a text earlier this morning about this. And he said, what do you think of AR and VR for commerce? And I said, well, virtual reality, I haven't really seen it work the way that I think it could work. So we haven't seen the potential yet. But augmented reality, if you look at Chip and Joanna Gaines, who's a famous couple, they have a TV show in the US. They have a store called Magnolia. Beautiful furniture out of Waco, Texas. But I'm not going to Waco, Texas, especially not right now. So if I want to buy something off of the Magnolia shop, well, they use sort of a partnership between Shopify and Apple. We worked with them on the AR kit, augmented reality kit. And now you can place the Magnolia furniture all over your house virtually. That is the best way to buy furniture, in my view, right now. But if you're selling, water cups or water glasses, you don't really need to use augmented reality. And so there isn't one channel that fits every business. It really does depend on who you are and who you're selling to.
And it goes from a marketing point of view too, right? You have to understand the journey your customer needs to make with you. And I always say, when people say, what platform should I be on? I said, wherever your customers are, because you being on one instead of 5, you're limiting. Someone wants to buy off Instagram, but someone else wants a great website, but someone else wants to be sold by email. It's how they want to be communicated to. So there's no right answer. It's how should I communicate with my customers? However they want to be communicated to.
Yeah. I was talking to a merchant last week. I'm doing sort of these IG lives when I'm bringing different Shopify merchants on. And I brought a merchant on out of Toronto, and she was telling me that the way that she communicates with her customers is almost entirely through SMS. And then I spoke to another merchant like a day later and said, oh, what about SMS? And I'm like, no, SMS would never work. So it seems like we all want to sort of cargo call. We all want to take notes of what everyone else is doing. But every business is different. And so it's important that, we have some businesses, some merchants on Shopify who spend the entirety of their time and attention on Pinterest ads, because for them, their demographic, the town square, if it was 150 years ago, their demographic would be hanging out in the Pinterest town square, as opposed to the TikTok town square, as opposed to the Snap town or the YouTube town square. Jeffree Star, who is one of my favorite Shopify merchants, who I believe has one of the greatest cosmetic companies on the planet and probably sells more, close to as much as Sephora does. Jeffree Star was doing makeup tutorials on YouTube. The entirety of his engagement with his end consumer is based on YouTube videos. If he went and started marketing on LinkedIn or he started marketing on Pinterest, it wouldn't work because that's not his business.
Since March, I'm just curious because as you're talking, since the pandemic started,
that's my daughter Bailey there. Hi Bailey, I'm on a call right now. I'll come see you after, okay? Sorry.
No worries.
That's real life right now. This is it. Working from home. And
I was on a call this morning. My son started banging the door. Dad.
I actually love it. I think it makes everything a lot more human and a lot more real. And I think we should all embrace this stuff. And we should all be the opposite of BBC Dad. Remember that dude?
Yeah.
That dude should have picked up his kid and put his kid on his lap and continued the interview with BBC, because that is what humans do.
And that probably would have went more viral than the other way around.
And we would have all admired him, like Dad of the Year, right?
Yeah. So since March, right? Yeah. Since the pandemic started, has there been an increase in Shopify stores?
Yes. New store creation was up. I think the number is, I have it somewhere here. I mentioned the earnings call. New store creation was up between March 15th and the end of April, something like 62% relative to the previous 6 weeks. So yes, more people now are trying their hand in entrepreneurship. More people are trying to start businesses now than before.
And I don't know if you have this stat, but I'm pretty sure you do. What are the rates of those that become successful? Like versus, every store starts and then one store goes down and then there's ones that succeed. How many of them end up becoming profitable or successful?
Yeah. Well, we don't know the profitability because we don't know the cost of goods sold. Yeah. We don't see we don't see the sort of the income statement of how the business does. What I can tell you is this: for a long time, I looked at stores, like, to me, a big successful store that was doing, I don't know, $250,000 a year. And I then took a trip to, we have an office in Bangalore. And I took a trip to India maybe 2 years ago. And Toby and I were there and we were just meeting a bunch of our merchants. What we realized was, for some of these merchants, making $2,000, equivalent to the rupee equivalent of $2,000, was basically sustaining their entire family. And then I started talking to people, even in Canada, students, that they were just looking to make $500 a month so they can pay the basic student debt premiums. So one of the things I love so much about entrepreneurship is we all do it for very different reasons. Some of us want to build empires. Some of us want to take the companies public, and that's cool. But some people start businesses on Shopify simply because they want to share their gift with the world. They want, maybe it's a grandmother who makes beautiful, blankets, knits blankets, and she just wants to share that with the world. Others just do it because they want to be able to make $500 a month because that is exactly how much they need to survive. So it's challenging to say this is how many people are successful. The cool part, though, I think about being an entrepreneur in 2020 is that it feels like the cost of failure is trending as close to zero as it's ever been. Meaning, for $29, you can start a business on Shopify. And as long as you sell $30 a month, you basically are, this is just for the sort of the infrastructure layer, you basically have a business that is sustainable. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I think the fact that it's not necessarily all about making $1 billion or building the next Fashion Nova, I think that's a really, really cool thing. Now, those building, Richard building Fashion Nova, his ambitions have always been really big. He wants to completely disrupt fast fashion, and he has. But some of my favorite stores that I buy from all the time, Sol Angeles, which is a cool store in LA, or Blue Salt, which a lot of my hoodies are Blue Salt. These are not businesses that necessarily are trying to become billion-dollar brands. They just want to, they want to make clothing and products for people that they know will appreciate it. There's this great, Seth Godin tells this great story. His first time walking into Momofuku, the original Momofuku in New York City. And Seth sits down, and Seth's been a huge mentor and advisor to me and to Shopify. Brilliant, brilliant man. But he tells this great story. He says he sits down and Seth doesn't eat meat, and he orders the Brussels sprouts at Momofuku, and the waiter says, and he says, but I don't want the bacon. And the waiter says, I'm sorry, like this is how it's served. And Seth says, no, I mean that's ridiculous. I don't eat bacon. It's cheaper for you, and I'll enjoy my meal better. A few minutes later, David Chang comes out of the kitchen and says, sorry about the dog barking.
Real life, I like it.
Real life. David Chang comes out of the kitchen and says, Mr. Godin, it's an honor to have you here. But I'm sorry, we can't serve your Brussels sprouts without bacon because this is the way it comes. And Seth says, but I really want it. And so eventually David Chang says to Seth, Seth, this restaurant is not for you. And Seth says that's when he knew that David Chang was going to be a massive success, because at that moment he realized David had this great understanding of who he was and who he wasn't, who his demographic was and who it wasn't, what he wanted to make and what experience he wanted and what they didn't. And he wasn't trying to be everything to everyone. And that kind of sounds like a weird, funny story about, the opening of Momofuku, but that's been one of the most important lessons that I've learned in my life, that I have to understand who I want to be and who I don't want to be. And I need to understand who Shopify should sell to and who we shouldn't sell to. We get asked all the time to go to create restaurant software, point of sale software. That's not our thing. If you want to run a restaurant, you need zones for your waiters and waitresses and servers and all that. Cool. That's just not what we do. Now, there are ways to work on Shopify through the APIs, through the extensibility that allows you to use. I mentioned, Joe Beef in Montreal and Becta in Ottawa are using Shopify software now to do these meal kits. But I think entrepreneurs often try to be everything to everyone, and that gets them into some trouble.
That's great. I'll eliminate how important is self-awareness from the questions to ask you, because you just kind of nailed it.
Yeah, self-importance is the thing that I probably struggled with the longest and the most. And I in the early days I felt that was I wasn't self-aware, and it really held me back.
I think that's most entrepreneurs, and that's where you have imposter syndrome. That's where a lot of different things come into play. For people listening, they're like, all right, I'm sold. I want to start a Shopify store, but what do I start in? If you could, they have you on right now with massive insight. Where are the opportunities in the e-com space right now?
So e-com, I don't think is necessarily a vertical or a space per se. It's e-commerce.
In terms of the Shopify online space.
But I think e-com in general is almost its own world. And so there's so many different things. I mean, I heard this great thing last week. Someone said, for every subreddit that exists in the world, and there's literally a subreddit for coasters for dogs. Like there's, or hats for cats probably has a subreddit. I kid you not. For every subreddit that exists in the world, for those who don't know what it is, it's basically a subcategory in the Reddit kind of discussion world and community. There probably is a community of a couple 100,000 people. So that's the cool part about the online version of retail, or the online version of entrepreneurship, is that something that may be a very small niche in a geography like Montreal or like Ottawa actually may have 1 million people globally connected online. So when someone asks me, hey, I want to start a business, I want to become an entrepreneur, usually what I try to pull out of them is, what is something you're already doing naturally, organically? If you are obsessed with microphones and microphone technology, you should probably start talking and posting about microphone technology and the different types of wind guards and the different types of recorders and amplifiers. And then maybe you say, hey, I found this one product that I'm going to resell because it's not available elsewhere. I think it's really fantastic. And then you start selling something, and you turn your audience and your sort of fan base into buyers. So rather than just trying to be random and being like, I'm going to sell whatever I can get the cheapest, I actually think you'll be a lot more successful if you sell something that's meaningful to you. And what is meaningful to you may be very different than someone else, but I think that's a better way to do it. I also think that if you're going to sell something generic, you're going to be competing with hundreds of thousands or millions of other stores.
No, but I just love that you said that, because listeners are going to think that's a cop-out answer, right? Like, I asked him to nail down a space and he said, do what I love, right? Like, it's a cop-out answer. But the thing is, Harley could tell you groceries, or he could tell you restaurants, or whatever it is. He could tell you whatever he thinks the biggest opportunity is. But if you're not passionate about that and you don't know that space, you're going to go in, you're going to try, and you're going to stop after 2 weeks.
Right. The reason I sold T-shirts is because I wear a T-shirt every day. I am the world's foremost expert on, informally, on T-shirts. So that's why I sold T-shirts. The reason that, there's a great store on Shopify, actually another Montrealer, the Hedonist. The reason that Noah sells hot sauce is because Noah is obsessed with a fucking hot sauce. And the reason that Kylie has an incredible cosmetics company is because Kylie is obsessed with cosmetics. And the reason that the Allbirds guys have been so successful is because they used to play soccer and they were obsessed with sneakers. And I can go on and on and on. That is the way to build a real business, is to find something that is meaningful to you. If you are the world's greatest sourdough baker, you should sell something, or maybe you're not even the world's best, but you love sourdough baking and you're always doing research on it. Sell your recipes, sell a beautiful cast iron, whatever to make bread in. That I think is actually what we all should be doing. We all should be commercializing our hobbies. I think the idea of commercializing one's hobby is the reason that entrepreneurship in the future will not be this thing that we talk about on podcasts and we're sort of, we're kind of informal about and it's very niche-y. Well, I know a few entrepreneurs. There's entrepreneur meetups. I think in the future, everyone will be an entrepreneur because all that's going to mean is that people are commercializing the things that they already love.
You just put out a video a few days ago or earlier this week or last week, a letter to entrepreneurs. And if you haven't watched it, go watch it. You get goosebumps, especially if you're an entrepreneur listening to it. Really, really well done. One of the things you talked about in there was Shopify being a scrappy little company. Those were your words. Sometimes scrappy becomes sloppy. And sometimes the lines get blurred a little bit between scrappy and sloppy. And they get blurred. So can you explain what's the difference between scrappy and sloppy?
Yeah. I think all of the entrepreneurs that I know, whether they're just getting started, at a coffee shop or, at their kitchen table right now, or they're the largest company on the planet, there is this pull to be hyper efficient, hyper effective, to be incredibly productive. We have calendars and schedules and to-do list applications, and we all have our notebooks sitting next to us and our note apps of all the stuff we want to accomplish. And entrepreneurs tend to be hyper optimized for execution. And that's wonderful. But sometimes, and the reason that this is something that I laugh at is because I fell into this trap a lot. Sometimes what I realized was running so fast wasn't scrappy. It wasn't agile. It wasn't efficient. It actually was kind of sloppy. And one of the things that I've been trying to do as I mature as a human being, as a leader of our company, is to begin to sort of realize, when can I spend another couple of minutes or couple of moments and be a little more reflective, so that I can still be scrappy and I can still get so much shit done, but I can do it with a little more polish. And you and I had this conversation sort of in the green room, the virtual green room. We talked about this because I think you also understand where I'm coming from with that, where, sometimes you're just trying to get so much out so quickly that you forget something that, actually has the opposite effect of what you're going for. It doesn't necessarily make us seem like we're hyper efficient. It makes us seem like we are sloppy. And this fine line between scrappy and sloppy is one that it's a really tough needle to thread, because sometimes you're like, well, is this scrappy or is this sloppy? I'm not really sure. But over time, I've now tried to become more mindful and more thoughtful about the things I'm putting out there. Even that video, for example, that love letter to entrepreneurs, I didn't spend that much time on it because I had an objective, which was I wanted to write something that I thought was a bit of a rallying cry for entrepreneurs around the world during probably one of the most difficult times in modern history, during the pandemic. But I also I couldn't spend a full day on it. But I knew that that there was this friction point, that if I didn't spend enough time on it, I wouldn't be articulate. It wouldn't be convincing. You wouldn't get goosebumps. And if I spend too much time on it, then I wasn't using my time appropriately. And that balance is something that is something that I'm working on. I haven't nailed it yet, but it's something that I think a lot about. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, let's just take something like ad copy. You want to do 20 different ads to see which converts better, and you're running A/B tests on different performance marketing. How's this ad? How's this keyword? Should I be bidding on this thing? How is this presented? Do I do a separate landing page as opposed to my entire store as the destination? What's my call to action? Where is the call to action in the actual web page? We try to do so many different things, but if every one of those things is not done properly and they're kind of sloppy, you're actually not getting any good feedback. You're just being sloppy about it. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I know it's something that you and I share.
Yeah, but yet speed is so important to us both, right? And it's so important for an entrepreneur to need to move fast. And if you look at people who have seen major success during this pandemic, are people who are, I talk a lot about the small company, right? There's pros and cons to being a small company. There's pros and cons to being a really big company. I think you saw one of the biggest pros now is the ability for small companies to move so fast and pivot without going through red tape or bureaucracy, or is this on brand, and just move out and do whatever they need to do in order to get their products out or their message out to people.
But the two are not mutually exclusive, right? I mean, Heinz Ketchup set up a store on Shopify 2 weeks ago to sell direct-to-consumer condiments. Lindt Chocolate set up a store on Shopify. I mentioned Snickers did. So there are big companies that are still being scrappy. And what I want for our company, for Shopify, is I want us to be to have all the economies of scale that we get with size. I want us to be I want us to have all the benefits of being a big company with fewer of the downsides. I want us to be scrappy. I want us to be entrepreneurial. I want us to I want us to fail fast and fail gracefully. I want us to get shit done. I want us to do all those things that we did 10 years ago when I first joined the company, when we were just a handful of us, but I want to do it at a massive scale. And I think there's a way to do it if you're very careful and thoughtful.
How important is routine to you?
I have high anxiety. I've had high anxiety most of my life. I've only recently started to talk about it publicly on forums like this, but I've been an anxious person since I was a kid. For a long time, I was able to manage it through coaching and through meditation, which I do every morning. COVID has my anxiety levels have been elevated during COVID. And so now I'm trying to find new things, but meditation aside, mentorship aside, books aside, the thing that I find helps me manage my anxiety the most and be, I think, fairly hyper efficient and hyper effective is routine and scheduling. So my entire day, including the walk that I'm going to take with my wife at 5:30 this evening, is in my calendar. My Saturday morning is scheduled. I want to take Bailey swimming. I then want to go I want to go cycling do 30K. I want to go for a walk with some friends if I can. Like, there's stuff that I want to do. But I schedule absolutely everything. Now, that's not for everyone. And some people may find that to be completely annoying and completely overly type A. But going back to self-awareness, I am aware of what I need to be the best version of me and to grow. That's what I need. Routine is incredibly important to me. And so, yeah.
We'll end here, and then if you're okay, take a couple of questions that people commented in. Pretend you're giving the state of the union right now on e-commerce. So where we're at now, and where do you see us going? So kind of like where we're at right now and the future of e-commerce.
I think that we will see e-commerce as a percent of total retail continue to grow. But I think that for the most part, we're going to stop calling it e-commerce. We don't say color TV. We just say TV. We don't say, gas operated automobile. We just say a car. So I think in many ways, commerce and retail is just going to be retail. And we're going to drop the fact that some are sold on one channel, some will be sold on other channels. I do think, though, that we will see more independent brands become category leaders and incumbents in the future. I think we will have less hegemonic companies. And if we do have them, they're going to have to be just incredible. There's going to be no room for mediocrity anymore in the future of e-commerce or commerce, full stop.
Amazing. And I agree. Let's take some questions. So Harley, thanks for your time. Any idea for travel and tourism industry?
I'm not sure. I think that things are going to change dramatically when it comes to the things that we do on a sort of an individual personal level. It feels like the new Flex isn't a cool watch. I don't even wear my watches anymore. It's not going to be having a nice car. It's going to be like, do you have a backyard? Do you have a place where you can go for a walk where you don't see people? So I think that we're going to have a little bit of a recalibration of society. That being said, I spent, I think 100 nights in 2019 traveling. So basically in hotels. And I was proud when I got my, super elite flight status from Air Canada. I'm not necessarily sure that I'm ever going to go back to that. Why? Because what I realized is a lot of those meetings, a lot of those trips that I took, going to India and studying how commerce happens in India, that's very valuable. Going to China, seeing how commerce happens in Shenzhen or Shanghai, very valuable. But there was a lot of meetings that I was going to simply because I wanted to show them that I was committed, that I was sacrificing my time to show them that I was committed to this relationship. I was committed to this partnership. And I'm not sure I'm going to do that ever again. What this crisis has done is it's proven to me that I can have a relationship with someone like you, for example, virtual. We've never met in person, but I can have a relationship with you, which may be different, but still equally interesting and compelling. And so I don't know about tourism. I don't really know about that side of it, but I do think business travel will change.
Common thread on this chat's been knowing who your ideal demographic is. What best practices / tools do you see stores leveraging to track and quickly understand who that is?
Some of these things, Paul Graham's got this great essay called "Things That Do Things That Don't Scale." Paul Graham is the founder of Y Combinator. Some of the things that you're going to have to do to figure out your demographic are not going to scale, meaning you literally may have to stand outside your own store, or in the virtual world, you may have to write a letter to every person it's a very short email to every person that checks out to say, "Hey, Jason, it's Harley. Thanks for shopping at Smoofer. I love that you picked this particular shirt. Just curious, why'd you come to my store? What other shirts do you like to buy? What other brands you admire?" That, I think, actually, even though it's not scalable and you won't necessarily have quantitative insight, you will have qualitative insight. And for me, qualitative is always more important, which I love the idea of focus groups, even non-traditional focus groups. I think that is a great way to do that. So if I was starting a bakery, for example, I would probably ask someone who was checking out to buy my delicious bread, "Hey, can I have your number? And can I call you in 2 days to see how you like the bread?" And I would just call them and say, "Hey, how was it? Where else do you buy your bread from? Did you share your bread with other people? Was it a gift?" That type of stuff, it seems simple. It seems rudimentary, but it works really, really well.
Ryan Deiss talks about that a lot, right? How do you scale the unmeasurable? And the brands that go on to succeed are the ones that don't really he was so focused on measuring things and seeing the results but sometimes the things that really propel a brand, there's no metric for it.
Exactly. I was traveling in November with my wife. We were in London. I was there for the Business of Fashion event. Business of Fashion does this thing called Voices. So I was there, and my luggage, I have a Tumi suitcase, got damaged. And so I sent an email to my local Ottawa Tumi store and said, "Hey, my suitcase is damaged." And they're like, "Great, go into our one of our stores in London." I went in there, and they actually had the exact suitcase that I was damaged with my initials already on it. The reason they were able to figure it out is because they realized that all the information is in the system. They just have to pull it from different places. And what has that done for me? It's made me an incredibly loyal Tumi consumer. Now, again, does that scale? Could they do that for everyone? No, but now they have a new sense of who I am and how I travel. Now they have someone who is going to talk about, I'm going to tell this story on podcasts like this. I think even the biggest brands in the world do things that don't scale. And some of those things are really important.
The CEO just picking up the phone for 10 minutes a day, calling their customers and being like, "Not trying to sell you anything, just want to say thank you and I appreciate you."
Yeah. If you go to my Instagram feed, you'll see, just scroll down on my grid, you'll see 4 times a year I take 2 days off from my day job and I answer Shopify support calls. Why? Because that gives me the best indication of how we're doing. Are we delighting merchants? Are there new areas of commerce that I don't fully understand that we're missing? That is the best way to understand what the heck is going on. I can get a report from it, but hearing the tonality, the voice inflection, the way that they speak, the level of excitement or lack or level of despair in their voice, that instructs me on how to be a better leader for a company.
Plus, if they're on the fence about your product or your service, that's definitely going to.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I don't tell them. I just say, hey, it's Harley from Shopify support.
Got it. Last question. What are the must-have apps that you can't live without if you were starting a Shopify store?
Must-have apps. I think Shopify email marketing is, we've spent years developing it. I know there's a lot of email marketing apps out there, but I don't think there's anything that functions nearly as well as our email marketing. I'm a huge fan of that. I think that's really, really important. It depends on your business. The reason we have an entire catalog and entire app store is because Shopify gives you 80 to 90% of what everyone needs, what most people need most of the time. But that last 15 or 10% of your functionality, that's going to be specific to your business, which is why we have this entire platform, this app ecosystem. So I would say it depends. What I would say, though, is that the neat part about starting a business on Shopify or any platform is you can play with it. See if email marketing is the way that it works for you. Maybe you need something that actually has a little more virality to it. Maybe there's a way to add videos into every one of your product descriptions. So it's not just a bunch of text, but it's, hey, it's Harley. This is my new T-shirt. Here's what it's all about.
Harley, thank you so much. I mean, it's not like you had anything better to do, right? Then come on.
Happy to come on. I love what you've built, and I love what you're doing, and I love the fact that your brand is so focused on mentorship. I would be a ball of untapped potential had it not been for great mentors in my life, and the fact that you're encouraging more people to connect with mentors, to develop mentorships. That is amazing. That's the modern day Harvard MBA.
Love it. Well, I appreciate you. All the success you had is super, super well deserved. And I hope you come back on and we talk about how you went even to the next level, which is scary because you're flying pretty high now, and I love it. And we just talked about all you've accomplished. But thank you, Harley. Really, really appreciate you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.